The opportunity is to live in trust or live in distrust. And I think we act and react and experience life very differently, being in a mood of trust.
Welcome to Season 3 of Leadership Impact, the podcast for modern executives who are reinventing leadership within their organizations, with your host, Executive Leadership Coach and CEO of the Granger Network, Kari Granger, and me, Paul Adams, CEO of Sound Financial Group. This season focuses on trust. This is episode 38, The Value of Trust in Chaotic Times. And as we're recording this, of course, we want to talk about something that's relevant, that's on everybody's radar right now, but Kari and I are not in our regular circumstances. You may notice a little bit of difference in quality, but we're just wanting to come alongside all of you in the midst of everything going on right now. And we didn't want to miss the chance to just be in communication and share with you a little bit about how we're thinking you may be able to make a difference right now.
I think in the pandemic, the opportunity is to live in trust or live in distrust. And I think we act and react and experience life very differently, being in a mood of trust. You know, if something really happens, I'm going to trust that my neighbors and my community and my coworkers are going to be there for me. And that gives me a different way to enter and be through this time. I trust, like in our history, that it may be a few months, it could be a year, but economically we will recover. I don't know how. I understand that all of the tools available for us from an economic standpoint are mostly on the demand side, not so much on the supply side. I understand there's different things about this crisis than previous financial crisis and what's been available for our government to do. However, when I choose to trust in humanity, like there are smart people here who are going to figure this out, or I choose to trust in the researchers and the scientists that there's smart people here, we're going to figure this thing out. And if I can continue to bring my contribution of leadership and continue to, in my coaching work, continue to free the, highly intellectual minds up, from their own fears and anxiety, that's my contribution. But if I choose to live inside of trust, I have a vastly different experience of this time, and I show up as a different person.
I would even go as far to say you actually will see different things and different possibilities. So you watch a briefing on what's going on, and if somebody's not watching for where is the trust, where can I trust humanity, experts, neighbors, then suddenly in that realization, you will see something different. So as an example, you might watch one of these briefings and you go, oh my gosh, there's this many more infections, there's this many more deaths, and you can just focus on that because that's what you're looking for. Whereas if you're looking for the trust in humanity, you hear them say things like, well, want to let you know, infection rates are going to skyrocket over the next 2 weeks because now we have testing online with commercial devices that can now take tens of thousands of throughputs a day. You're also going to see that we're trying some different medications. Now we have this information out of France that this particular malaria medication, small sample size, but 100% success ratio on recovery and cure. So we're seeing things like that when we're watching for them. But if we're not watching for that, then we just see it, and all the algorithms when we participate in the internet are going to give us what we're looking for. And so we unintentionally tilt our hand to that. So we're going to see all the people fighting over toilet paper and not see, like when I saw those videos, I'm looking and I'm like, gosh, if somebody was just there to point out that there's countless boxes of Kleenex right next to that on the shelf or paper towels. And it's like, but people are so focused on the tragedy, even when they're at it in person fighting over toilet paper, they're missing the opportunities that are right next to it on the shelf.
And just even thinking about opportunities, with my family and I, we've decided, we're choosing, we're looking, we are not going to let this go by. Like, we're not going to let this crisis go by without an evolution in how we are together, right? So
yes,
it is not easy to run a business in 4 hours a day, because now with the kid home, we have to like share our time, right? So, and keeping clear on my outcome, right, of not letting this family opportunity go by, because who in their right mind would like quarantine your own family to your house for like weeks on end, maybe months, we don't know.
Well, you have to be with them.
You know, but I'm just noticing how like consumerism from my, is down. Like every weekend, we're the kind of family that's, okay, where are we going to go? Right. Mm-hmm. And there's so much distraction. And as we're settling into being together, it's like, wow, my kid is hilarious. My husband is so caring. It's like, I know that, but I get to see, to your point, like, what am I looking for? So inside of my mantra of I'm not going to let this go by without a, amazing evolution in our family, I'm looking for our connection. I'm looking for the joy of being together, right? And it really impacts my experience.
And as human beings, we're going to notice something.
Right. Right. So what are we noticing?
Yeah, only if we cultivate, cultivate what we're committed to.
Right.
And I'm somebody who's prepared for disasters like this because that's how I've done it for years. Not crazy, but we don't have a bunker, but you got appropriate food, water, all that. For years we've had that. So we haven't had to react. But even with that kind of mindset, as I refer to as being an apocalyptimist, is that it just means I think it's all going to one day go badly, and I want to thrive in those moments. But what it's allowing me to do, and I've watched other people who also have prepared in some way, and they're watching for, this is happening, or this thing is probably what China's done and attacked the world, or whatever things. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's like, all that aside, like, you can literally prepare for the worst and then cultivate what you're committed to, so what you see is the best. Just checking on our two neighbors that are on our cul-de-sac who are over the age of 65. And one guy is a former Coast Guard guy and pretty tough. He's in his 60s. And he's like, oh, yeah, I'm just going to the store. No big deal, because, my wife can't go because she's immunocompromised. And like looking at him and going, Bill, you going out there is as much the problem as hers. Tell me what your grocery list is. We'll go get it.
Yeah, right.
And being able to do that and come alongside people who otherwise will put themselves in harm's way without knowing it. But all that comes out of what we're choosing to be committed to, which then increases trust. And maybe that would be a kind of a neat thing for you to comment on, is people see actions of other people in a culture. Now, that culture is, although it's a very fractional period of time, exists in line at Costco. It exists at the grocery store, exists on your block. And similar to maybe in an office environment, when somebody takes that action that is different than whatever the prevailing context is, shows kindness in the midst of people bickering, or, cultivating our awareness of where the greatest in humanity is going to show up. And people see you take an action about the way it impacts that culture, whatever culture is watching you do that.
It's interesting. I've been talking with a number of my clients, and they have been commenting, I work a lot in education, healthcare, and military, right? I work in other industries, but those three in particular. And the healthcare client, right? They, like, the heroic efforts have been incredible. And they're now working together, whereas they have been, they're a national company, the one I'm speaking about. Mm-hmm. And, there'd always be like a little friendly competition, right? Like, okay, my program is going to beat out your program. It's not like that. Right now it's, okay, how many masks do you need? This is how many we have. I'm going to give you masks today because I'm going to need gloves tomorrow. Yep. And the way that they've been working together, and it kind of took one, right? It takes one to say, yes, I'm going to open up. I'm going to choose generosity in this time. I'm going to choose kindness. I'm going to choose leadership at this time. And there's another organization we're working with in the education space, and we got to see them once, and, they really struggle in working together, right? Different departments, different, they're in this polarity of, centralized, standardized management versus decentralized, autonomous, get out of my chili kind of philosophy, yes. Right? Always between the two. And, they have had a bit of a difficulty really coming together. And, we led a webinar for them yesterday, and like the humanity that showed up on the videos was amazing. Like, whoa, you're going through that. Like it just took one to soften.
Yes.
Right. And that impacts the culture. So what's been showing up for me is, these guys are experiencing what I've experienced and what many of my former veterans have experienced in combat. It's like different. You show up differently in combat from military than you do at home in garrison, right? Mm-hmm. So, and they've been saying, man, if we can bottle this up and continue it once we leave, that would be extraordinary. And I've always thought, wow, who my unit was in combat is not the same unit as we were in garrison, right? But it does show, like when we open up, when we take action to, address somebody, what they need and what they care about, it can create this beautiful cycle of trust and, continuous, heroic, beautiful, soft, generous conversations. And, the pandemic didn't cause that. Combat didn't cause that. It was a human being taking that action. And so if we see in our power, we can shift that dynamic so dramatically, so quickly. And, we got to see it here, right? The incredible impact of human beings coming together. Another thing I've been thinking of, have you seen this, the parable of the Chinese farmer, Alan Watts' parable of the Chinese farmer?
Maybe good news, maybe bad news, we'll see.
Yeah, it starts, I encourage, anybody to look it up. It's the Chinese farmer, Alan Watts, and, something like a Chinese farmer, and, his son was out in the farm tending to the fields, and his horse knocked him over and he broke his leg, something like that. And all the villagers came in and they said, oh, it's so terrible, it's so terrible. And the Chinese farmer says, maybe. And then we'll see, maybe. And then the next day, the conscription came, to take all the young men to go into the army, but they rejected his son because he had a broken leg. And all the neighbors came and said, oh, isn't that wonderful? Your son didn't have to go to war. He says, maybe, right? Mm-hmm. And then, it continues and his son heals and, all these wild horses, all of a sudden, like the wild horses come to his farm. Oh, no, the first thing is the horse ran away. And all the neighbors say, oh, that's so sad. Your horse ran away. Who's going to, do your plow? Maybe. And then the horse came back with a bunch of new wild horses, right? Mm-hmm. And they got all these new horses. Maybe. So it just reminds me, like these times remind me of the parable of the Chinese farmer. It's like, what's our parable? No more paper towels. Oh, it's so awful. Maybe. Well, then all of a sudden, maybe we start reusing, like, in our house, we use bar towels instead of paper towels, right? So the waste goes down. Well, isn't that great? Maybe, I don't know. Right.
That's just it, is that people are making the moral assessment of things being good or bad, mm-hmm. as opposed to just saying this is the situation. Like, think about it as we all have to, in our busy days, all stop and now intentionally go out of our way to be physically distant and emotionally connected to other people.
Yeah, and I want to underline what you said. We would like to put a stop to this idea of social distancing. We are not distancing social. And I want to give a call out to Miriam Hyman, who wrote about this on LinkedIn. She says, hey, let's stop saying social distancing. Let's say physical distancing, socially connected. Mm. Yeah, because, I'm walking down I'm on a hike yesterday. And no, 2 days ago before the snow, I was on a hike 2 days ago, and people are walking by and it's like, yeah, they're kind of doing the 10-foot go around each other as we're going by the trail. But then they weren't looking at me. I'm like, no, we can be socially connected and physically distant. Okay, anyway, I cut you off. Keep going.
No, I think you're dead on that what we get stuck on is that we get stuck on, I'm by myself. It's like, well, no, maybe for the first time, I'm going to reach out to some people I know and just say, hey, man, how are you doing? Like people that we've seen their Facebook posts for the last 5 years and didn't call them.
Right.
And take the time to go out of our way to be in relationship with people, which has not much, owning a business where we've done nothing but Zoom meetings with our clients for over 3 years.
Right.
And in some ways, I feel slightly guilty with the fact that almost nothing has had to change in our business right now. Mm-hmm. Now we're leaping to the help of one of our employees right now, but it's not, we haven't had to change how we do our daily huddle. We haven't changed how we do any of our meetings. We haven't had to modify any of that in the midst of people who had, hundreds of employees and now figuring out how do we keep data secure and they're remote and them safe and they're going through massive changes right now. It's so easy for people to focus on either I'm now physically distant from everybody and be down on that versus, to your point, if I'm committed to the fact that humans are really great and I'm committed to the fact that
choice.
By choice,
not evidence, choice.
Yes. And that people are trustworthy and that we will all get through this together. I'm going to see totally different things in the same situation than someone's going to see if it's like, this is it. This is the government doing things poorly, or these elected officials doing something badly, or my company should have done something different, or you go down the list. The people on the play date, I don't think they washed their hands enough, whatever came up.
It reminds me too of like transforming our fears and our anxieties into these commitments. So, what I was just thinking the other day, there's a number of things that I can have fear or anxiety about. And I'm, just picking one, right? I have a 6-year-old at home. And I can have a fear that she's not going to have enough connection, right? I can transform that fear into a commitment, right? So if that's what if I use my fear as a guidepost to what I really care about, I then can make that happen, right? So I'm really committed to my daughter feeling, really socially connected. So you know what I did yesterday? I got her and her friends on a Zoom call. It was the funniest thing you've ever seen. They're like disappearing from the screen. I've disappeared. Then they come back on. I've appeared, right? They're learning how to come at the video backwards. But that came out of me looking inside of my fear, turning that into a commitment, and then taking action.
Yes.
Right. And that's, humans are so incredible. If we can stay in this mode of creativity and keep dealing with our own fears and moving into what's next, what can I create here? What am I committed to here?
And it's like one of the things around all that is also helps you, I think more rationally. Like so many people are dealing with the lizard brain hijack right now about so many things. And that's evidenced by the fact that we have people buying tons of water for a virus.
Right.
That is people aren't sitting back and going, gosh, I haven't been as prepared as maybe I should be for a disaster like this. And while this one won't involve water, maybe a future one will, so I'll buy some more and put it. No. Your amygdala is literally saying, what do I need to survive? And is naturally going to water, even though our frontal cortex did not process on that for a second before people loaded out a ton of water. When you suddenly realize, like, wait, I'm going to be committed to those things, you just see a whole slew of different possibilities than what you would ever see otherwise. Like, for instance, with the financial markets being what they are, we're talking to a lot of our clients right now, helping them hold strategy, helping people that are not clients of ours just review their investments so that when the market comes back, they're positioned to be able to get that return. And yet everything could change like in a day, meaning if they come out next week and go, we basically have maybe out of the malaria medications or whatever they're using, we have basically a Tamiflu equivalent now for coronavirus. And we're going to give it a few more days, but we think everybody can go back to work next week. Like, if that happens, how quickly does everything everyone's been wildly freaked out about change overnight?
Yeah, and that's like when I hear you talk, there's so much trust behind what you're saying. And it enables you to function effectively during these times. Not like blind, but here's the thing, like mostly what creates anxiety for people is we can't see a future, right? But here's the thing, seeing a future is a total illusion anyway. We didn't see, a month ago, it's not like we saw this, but our brain said, oh, what's been happening? Good, I'm going to predict that that's what's going to continue to happen like next week. Right? So then we act consistent with that, and that reduces our anxiety because we have a predicted future based on what we've seen. When something like this happens, we have nothing to predict the future on. Right? And so, we really do have a choice. Because our predicted future is what we're taking actions consistent with. So if we predict the end of the world, we're going to take actions consistent with that. And I'm just going to tell you, if the end of the world is coming in a month, I don't want to spend my last month in fear.
Yes. Yeah, like I can think of a whole long list of things I'd rather do than sit back and be fearful in the last month on earth.
Right? So it's like, what's giving me my action? It's not this rationality. It's a predicted future. And if we just let our fears predict the future, our experience of the present is going to be a whole lot of suffering and unnecessary action. Now, not to say you shouldn't take smart action. You should definitely do that. But like you said, everything could change next week. We just don't know. So how are we going to live today, right? So tomorrow we can look back on today and say, that was a day spent well. And I think there requires a certain level of trust in ourselves and our family and our neighborhoods and, in the greater humanity that there is a better future. We may not know exactly when, but it's coming. How do I choose to live today? I choose to live in trust because that impacts who I am, and it impacts how I show up at Costco. A colleague of mine said she's at Costco, it was like 2 weeks ago, maybe already, or a week ago. And the line was from one end of the store all the way back to the other just to check out. And she said she just started this one act of kindness, right? She started she was great. She had great energy, and she noticed all around her, people started being that way. Like, go ahead, go in front of me. Totally impacted her entire afternoon from her first act of kindness and seeing the ripple effect. So that's how she chose to spend the day.
And so I think that might be one of the biggest things people can take away from this conversation. And one, know that Kari and I really appreciate all of your trust in the midst of all this going on, that you're listening to this amidst the COVID-19 crisis versus absorbing the next thing that gets in the way of you extending trust. And to just sit back, maybe talk with a close friend or with a spouse about what can we do to extend trust in this moment. And I think of extending trust is not like just we're not going back to our prior episodes. We're not talking about trust falls. What we're talking about is your capacity like a bridge spanning over a gap. We're just going to extend one more piece and then one more piece. And then what happens when everybody else sees the bridge? They say, gosh, I thought that span could never be covered before. And much to the Costco experience you just shared is that then other people see it. And then what do? They feel like they can extend a little bit of trust.
It's contagious. Trust can also be contagious.
That's right. There is a contagion going on.
There is.
And we've even made some posts to our YouTube channel over at Your Business, Your Wealth about how much some of what's contagious is what's infecting people's brains.
100%. 100. Yeah. So again, we choose to live in trust because it gives us the freedom to have the kind of life and experience that we want. So it's a choice. It's a declaration.
And what a great example to do this in your workplaces, in your home, and at the store. That idea of extend trust, come up with ways to do it and share them with us. You can find Kari on LinkedIn, find us on social media, send us notes where you extended trust and it made a difference. because you sharing that extension of trust is as contagious as you could imagine. And being able to make a difference in these times that we're all going to get through together. And as always, we hope that this episode has been a contribution to your leadership impact. Thank you for tuning into Leadership Impact, the podcast for modern executives who are reinventing leadership within their organizations. Subscribe now at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.